What's up and welcome to 17 on the Food Lab. Today we're going to be making mochi. Mochi has to be the most popular Japanese dessert out there. And what makes a good mochi is a soft, bouncy, stretchy dough. And in this recipe, we're going to fill the mochi with a super rich Matcha Ganache. Mochi is absolutely delicious. If you've never tried it, this is one of those recipes that you gotta go and make right away. And with all that said, I've talked way too much, and let's jump straight into this recipe. Welcome everyone, let's get straight into this recipe. First, we need to make up a matcha ganache that will add to the center of the mochi. Let's begin by making a matcha paste. In a small bowl, add 20 ml of whole milk. Then to the milk, add 20 grams of good matcha powder. Give this a good mix, and what we're looking for is an intense matcha paste. When ready, place to one side and we'll add this to the ganache later. Moving on to the ganache. And ganache is essentially a fancy word for cream and chocolate. To a saucepan, we firstly want to add 133 grams of heavy cream. Next, add 1 egg yolk, then give the cream a good mix. When the eggs combined, it's now time to heat up the cream. The worst thing we can do at this point is to scramble that egg yolk. Turn the flame onto the lowest heat possible, then begin to heat up the cream. Stir constantly, and we want the temperature of the cream to come up to 70 degrees centigrade. When the cream looks like it wants to come up to the boil, remove from the heat and place to one side. Whilst the cream is still nice and warm, we now want to add 400 grams of good white chocolate and the matcha paste made earlier. Give the cream a good mix, and we want this mixture to become nice and smooth. I'm not sure why, but it's super satisfying to melt chocolate. When ready, the chocolate should be melted and nice and smooth. Next, we can pass the wet ganache through a fine sieve. This will get rid of any possible clumps of egg or chocolate within the ganache. Keep the ganache to one side, and it's time to make this thing even better. First, we want to roughly chop 20 grams of deshelled pistachios. The flavour of pistachio and matcha works really well together, and as we didn't add any salt to the ganache, this will cover that too. When roughly chopped, add to the ganache along with 20 grams of desiccated coconut. Give this a good mix, and the ganache is ready to move on to the next phase. And at this point, give the ganache a quick try. I promise you, these flavours work ridiculously well together. Next, we can go ahead and empty out the ganache into a baking tray lined with cling film. And the cling film will make it easier to remove the ganache when set. Give the tray a quick tap to get rid of any air pockets, then cover nice and tightly. Finally, place in the fridge and store until completely set. 2 hours later, the ganache should now be ready to work with. Now remove the cling film and divide the ganache up into 16 equal sized pieces. At this point, the ganache may still be quite soft, but this is totally cool as we're not after a firm filling. When divided, take out one of the pieces and begin to roll into a small ball. And you may want to use some latex gloves here, as this can be a bit messy. When shaped, add the ball of ganache to a tray of desiccated coconut. Dredge well, then shape into a tight ball again. The dredge will help stabilize the ganache and also add another layer of flavor. Place onto a tray, then repeat this process for each piece of ganache. These actually taste pretty damn good already, and are probably a recipe on its own. But still, we're going to cover these in mochi, which will take them to that next level. Cover tightly, then store back in the refrigerator. And it's now time to make some mochi. Now the moment you've been waiting for, how to make the mochi. The whole process is actually pretty simple and won't take long at all. In a large mixing bowl, add 160 grams of glutinous rice flour. We can also add 40 grams of cornstarch and 60 grams of white sugar. Give all of the dry ingredients a good mix, then we can slowly add 280 grams of whole milk. As we add the milk, constantly stir the flour, as this will prevent lumps of dough from forming up. When all of the milk is added, continue to whisk, and we're looking for a smooth like batter consistency. When ready, add 20 grams of neutral cooking oil, then whisk again. And now the batter is ready to steam. Lightly grease a small but large enough baking tray, and then we can add all of the mochi batter. Try not to waste any, and it's now time to steam. Unfortunately, this baking tray couldn't fit inside of my steamer, so I'm going to steam the mochi using my wok with just a touch of water. If steaming this way, make sure the tin is lifted up from the water. Now, on a medium heat, we can add our steaming device, then cover with a tight fitting lid. And at this point, we want to allow the mochi to steam for 20 to 25 minutes. As we wait for the mochi, add half a cup of cornstarch to a dry pan. Cook for a minute or two, then when slightly transparent, remove from the heat. Keep this to one side, and we'll use this to help knead the mochi. Going back to the mochi, after 20 minutes, this thing should now be ready. As you can see, it's now set and pretty transparent. Ever so carefully remove the mochi from our steaming device. Set to one side, then fold in the mochi using a spatula. And all we want to do here is to slightly loosen up the mochi and to let it cool. The mochi at this point is far too hot to be working with our hands. After a few minutes, when it's slightly cooler, empty out onto a worktop, then generously coat with some of our cooked cornstarch. Now onto the intense kneading phase. You may have seen some people bashing this thing with a hammer. Regardless, using a hammer or your hands, knead this thing until nice and bouncy. You may notice at this stage the mochi is still pretty sticky, but an occasional dusting of cornstarch will make this far easier to work with. When the mochi becomes less sticky and more bouncy, divide the dough into two. To one half, add 1 tablespoon of 70% dark cocoa powder. And at this point we want to knead in the cocoa powder until the mochi becomes super smooth and elastic. After a few minutes of kneading, the mochi should now be much more manageable. Dust again with cornstarch, then roll the mochi into a log. Now we can divide the mochi up into 5 or 6 equal sized pieces. Then when cut, keep these to one side and cover to prevent them from drying out. As for the other half, we're going to keep this one plain. Again, we want to knead this for a few minutes whilst occasionally dusting with cornstarch until smooth. Again, divide into 5 or 6 equal sized pieces, then this half is ready also. Now we can gather each piece of mochi that we've cut into small tight balls. Place all of the balls onto a tray that's lightly dusted with cornstarch, then we're ready to build up the mochi. Dust the worktop yet again with some more cornstarch. Now take out one of the balls of mochi and dust over the top. Flatten with your palm to form a flat disc. Now, using a rolling pin, continue to roll out the dough into a larger disc. Rotate the dough as we continue to roll. And as for the size, we want this to be around the same size as our palm. When ready, try to dust off as much cornstarch as possible. And now we can take out our ganache filling made earlier and add it to the center of the mochi. Gather the edges of the mochi together and seal nice and tightly. And at this point we can twist away any excess mochi. Tidy into a tight ball of mochi again, then try and remove some more of that cornstarch. And there we have it, we now have our first ball of mochi. Set to one side, then repeat this process for each piece of mochi. A few things to keep in mind when making mochi is that cornstarch is mochi's friend. Also, try and keep the dough covered as much as possible, as if it's exposed it can dry out pretty quickly. When made, these things can last in the fridge for 1 or 2 days, but the mochi are at their best when eaten right away. So let's get to it. Mochi and green tea is always a good combo, so let's start here. First I'm going to make a little bed for the mochi to sit on. All this is a mixture of desiccated coconut, matcha and sugar. All for the gram, but it tastes pretty good. Now add as many mochi as you think you can handle. This is pretty big mochi and maybe too many for me. But anyways, we can now add a generous dusting of matcha powder over the top. And finally, I finish with some edible cherry blossom. Not sure why I have this, but it's all good. And finally, our mochi are now ready. I just want to take the time to say thank you for watching and thank you all for your support. This channel is still small but still growing, and that's thanks to you guys. And if you haven't already and enjoyed the video, slap that subscribe button and join the food lab. Oh, and as for the mochi, this was bouncy and delicious. Have fun making mochi and let me know in the comments if you get to try out this recipe. And until the next episode, take care and peace as always.